I include this program as one of several that we put on as a part of our history series that we do throughout the year. We've had Jim speak with us before, and we're delighted to have him and Brian back. So many of you probably already know the two gentlemen who are going to be speaking this evening. They are both Civil War experts in our local area. Jim is a member of the 100 Mil Defense League. He's done lots of work documenting, doing research on the role of the 100 Mill Road and the whole area in the Civil War. He has written, he has lectured on the topic. Brian is likewise a Civil War expert. Both of them are members of the Bull Run, what's it called? The Bull Run, Roundtable, Civil War Roundtable. Brian is a West Pointer, and as such, his particular interest is the role of West Point in the Civil War. So he is going to be talking a little bit about that today. He's written about it, lectured about it, speaks about it. So we have two experts on the topic, and I think tonight you're going to really enjoy hearing their story of the Union movement through our area toward Gettysburg. Jim, I guess you're on first. Jim? He's dealing with lighted. Oh, let me just put a plug in. I'm sorry. Well, no, you're delaying. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot my big plug. I want you all to remember that the Reston Historic Trust is a non-profit organization, and we really live and die by memberships. It's a very important part of our support. So if you're not a member, we really encourage you to join. It is a major, such a deal. It costs very little, and you get some wonderful benefits from it. Very much focused on history of this area. So if you haven't joined, please consider joining. You can join with us right after the show. Okay, Jim.
Okay.
You're on.
Welcome. Thanks for everybody coming tonight. It's great to see a lot of good faces that I've met over the years, and the tours locally and everything, and really appreciate you supporting this event. I believe this is the one sesquicentennial event this year, presentation within Reston. That's 150 years ago. And you're going to see something a little bit different tonight, and that is a two-person presentation. So hopefully we can make it without tripping over each other too terribly much. Of course, my cohort and colleague is Brian, and we are members of the Bull Run Roundtable, but I'm local. Probably seen and met most of you locally here at all sorts of different events and functions. I live in Reston, and Bob and myself over here, we're the guys that have the Confederate trenches in our backyard. We're right off of 100 Mill Road. And you're going to hear a little bit about 100 Mill tonight in a couple of the slides. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here. Been looking forward to this. Matter of fact, when we set this up, I talked to Warren Bruce, who most everybody here knows, and he said, when would you like to? I said, June 27th. And he worked that out for me, because tonight is the perfect night to make this presentation. And just think about the sesquicentennial thing, 150 years ago, because we're going to take you back, and I'm going to tell you what is happening this very second in the Civil War in this local area. And there was quite a bit happening. To some degree, some things potentially affected Gettysburg. So anyway, we're going to have fun doing this. So what I'd like to do is start out with really a statement. Much has been written about Gettysburg and Lee's retreat. However, not much has been written about the actual march of the Union's Army of the Potomac crossing northern Virginia, just getting to Gettysburg. Everybody knows about the boom boom, the battle, the commanders, and the tactics, and that's fascinating material. But very few people, and we've done this presentation now 3 times, folks say they never knew what they're going to hear tonight. So we're here to hopefully bring you up to speed a little bit on something, a different fascination, thing that is very fascinating with that march. 4 years ago, Brian and I, again, we were involved with the Lawrence Civil War Roundtable, and we ran across each other. He was working on his West Point book, which should be coming out very shortly, on a class of 62, 1862. And of course, I was doing my thing, anything Hunter Mill Road or the corridor. And what we found out was that our research, even though it was separate, it overlapped. And we had found identical results. And that is the conditions the soldiers had to go through crossing Northern Virginia just to get to the Potomac. And then they had to go to Gettysburg and fight a little battle up there. But just crossing Northern Virginia, they really went through a horrendous situation. And you're going to hear about that tonight. Anyway, we had this discussion. We took the information to the Roundtable's tour committee, and we said, hey, we got something here. What do you think? They said, do a tour. We ran a tour, and the feedback was so good that they said, hey, you guys got to publish this. Well, we were both very, very busy at the time. And about a year ago, we got in touch with each other, and we said, hey, what's your calendar look like? And each of us could fit it in. So we wrote a self-guided tour booklet, which is over here. It details the crossing, and it provides a guided tour across Northern Virginia. And I'm talking Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun counties, to Edwards Ferry, which is where Goose Creek flows into the Potomac out in Loudoun County. For purposes of our tour, we follow the Union's second corps. And that again is through the Northern Virginia section. We've included a number of military situation maps, and we've got a few tonight, which will provide context so you understand what's going on at the time. And it's just not a tour following the second corps. The Army of the Potomac back then, 150 years ago, had two objectives. One was to protect the nation's capital. Number two, they had to find Lee and get him, because word was he was headed north, but they didn't know where he was. Neither did Washington, D.C. What did Lee want to do? He wanted to strike a mortal blow on the Army of the Potomac, but he wanted to do it in Northern Territory. And even if he didn't totally succeed, he wanted to strike a blow to the psyche of the citizenry within the North, so that, quite frankly, they throw in the towel. So one way or the other, Lee wanted to end this war. The route that we follow is so historically rich that we have documented, and again, our booklet, 14 what we call historical points of interest. And that's beyond and above what we're doing with the Civil War. I mean, we're going all the way back 150, 120 years before the Civil War. So as you drive the tour, you're going to be able to see all these points of interest. What's cool, they're still there to this very day. So today's presentation borrows from portions of our booklet. It's not the whole booklet, we're just doing a few things because of time constraints. Let's go back in time. The Battle of Chancellorsville, May 1863. How many folks have attended any of my tours locally? Okay. You all remember Old Bad Road and Bad Road? There was a map back then that was drawn. And Old Bad Road was and is Vale Road today. Bad Road was and is today Stewart Mill Road. Well, this pertains to the surveyor who authored and named those roads on the McDowell map of 1862. His name is General Emil Weeks Whipple, A.W. Whipple. And again, we're going to go back to Chancellorsville, May of 1863. During the fighting at Chancellorsville, General Whipple was shot near the heart and died. His men professed great surprise that a ball can penetrate the layers of dirt covering the general's body. He was so filthy as to be considered invulnerable.
Let me pick up on what Jim started with. And this is one of our situation maps that were included in the booklet. And it's designed to show the locations of the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac at various points in June of 1863. Now, before I do this, I want to back up to what Jim started with, and that was Chancellorsville, because you have to understand what happened after Chancellorsville in order to understand why some of this happened. So I'll give you a little bit of the context. In May, after Chancellorsville, Robert E. Lee had a couple things he had to do. He had to replace Stonewall Jackson as a commander. He got permission from President Jefferson Davis to appoint Richard Ewell to take over Stonewall Jackson's second corps. Longstreet still had the first corps. He also got permission to reorganize the Army of Northern Virginia and added a third corps and appointed Ambrose P. Hill in order to command that particular corps. He had lost 13,000 men at Chancellorsville. He was able to pick most of this up, and by the end of the month, he had almost as many people in the Confederate Army as they had during at the beginning of the Peninsula Campaign. Now, across the river, Fighting Joe Hooker in Stafford County and Falmouth had similar problems with the loss of casualties. He lost 17,000, but that wasn't his biggest problem. His biggest problem was he was about to lose almost 40 to 50,000 of the 9-month and 2-year volunteers that had been part of the Army of the Potomac. On paper, he had well over 100,000 troops, but in reality, he was down at about 80,000 by the time he was at near Falmouth. So the other thing that Robert E. Lee was able to do is he gave a plan to President Davis to invade the North, ostensibly to break the pressure off the Confederacy. You had Grant messing with Vicksburg. They were about to lose their supply lines across the Mississippi River, and he thought if he went north, it would stop the Union Army from sending reinforcements that way. So that sort of brings it to the end of May. He had requested permission to invade the North. He got that permission the first part of June. And the first thing he did was to back off Longstreet and the First Corps, and they laid A.P. Hill back here, and he started Richard Ewell heading back. But initially they went to Culpeper. Now, when they started moving, Joe Hooker had a very good Bureau of Military Intelligence under Colonel Sharp, and he was able to pick up on the organizational changes. But once Lee started moving, as Jim pointed out, he really didn't know what his intentions were. He didn't know whether he was going into Pennsylvania, whether he was going to Baltimore, or whether he was going back to Washington. So it was a very interesting type of thing that they got started with. So what did Hooker do? His first plan was, I'm going to pitch into Robert E. Lee's rear, and that lasted probably a couple of days because Lincoln and General Halleck in Washington turned thumbs down. They said, no, we don't want you to do that. He sent a reconnaissance in force across the river here with the 6th Corps, and just to test out the defenses, to see what was left. And A.P. Hill put up a good defense. They didn't think there was enough Confederates that had left, and he was put down there. But he did find out some things. He found out that Jeb Stuart was gathering the cavalry at a place near Culpeper. And he thought that he would send his new cavalry corps that Joe Hooker had put together. He'd taken his independent brigades and created 2 divisions. He said, I'm going to send General Pleasanton up there. And of course, this started the Brandy Station fight that took place on the 9th of June. Well, with that taking place, his second plan that he had to do was to get to Lincoln, and he wanted to go and attack Richmond. And Lincoln, about 45 minutes after we received that message, said, no, Robert E. Lee and his army in Northern Virginia is your primary objective. That's what we want you to chase. And fretting all the time. Hooker now knew he had to do something. So what he did is he put the Army of the Potomac on the alert on the 11th of June, and he split it into 2 parts. a left wing that was going to go up along the Rappahannock and up the O&A Railroad past Warrenton to consolidate around Centerville and Manassas, and a right wing under General Slocum up the Telegraph Road. That's Route 1, by the way. And they were going to go up with the 6th Corps and the 12th. The 2nd Corps that we're going to follow was going to stay back here as a rear guard. And this all started on about the 13th and 14th of June. By the 15th and 16th, you had tens of thousands of soldiers in Fairfax County around and parts of Prince William. You had tens of thousands of animals, soldiers marching with 40 and 50-pound packs on, 60 rounds of ammunition, and 3 days' rations, all consolidating up here in Fairfax County. This is on by the 15th and 16th, all except the 2nd Corps. Now, just a note about the 2nd Corps. Winfield Scott Hancock was its commander, newly appointed. It had 3 divisions in it, about 14,000 men, 600 wagons, and about 20 guns. And it was the rear guard that was coming up here. And one of the things that I did in the research for my book on the West Pointers is I found one of the guys in the 2nd Corps who wrote 265 letters during the war, and parts of them dealt with this route that took up here. So Jim and I have been mining that piece as part of the independent. So that's what we want to do at this point, and turn it back to Jim.